Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall, a live look at the White House. Just past 10:30 in the nation's capital, just past 7:30 on the West Coast. President Biden's administration is urging Ukraine to quickly increase the size of its military by drafting more troops and revamping its mobilization laws to allow for the conscription of those as young as 18. In basic terms, what that means is they're hoping that Ukraine will lower the draft age. National security analyst and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer is standing by. When this headline came across my plate, Hal, it made me wonder, why would the White House be pushing this out there? Is Ukraine hurting for troops?
Austin, Ukraine is very much hurting for troops. In fact, they're constant. One of the things they talk about is their lack of manpower on the battlefield, and they mobilized, activated, mobilized, put all their folks on the battlefield, and they've never let them go. They can't rotate them out because they're basically they don't have enough troops to rotate troops on an orderly manner off the line, let alone anybody getting discharged or anything like that, unless of course they're wounded or something where they get medically discharged. And the problem is that they have it's rather an interesting thing. I mean, some of us, I hate to say it, we almost think this sounds great in a European coffee house, which is, no, you shouldn't join the serve. You shouldn't have to go serve until you're 27. So you live some life, you have some, and that's been kind of the discussion there was, hey, we don't want to wipe out the entire generation in this war. So, let's not have a draft until age 27. They finally last year lowered it down to 25. And of course, all the other nations around the world that have dealt with this forever looked at it and go, 25, 27, it's 18. Everywhere else, it's 18, 19, something like that throughout Europe. Certainly when the U.S. had the draft, that's been the age that you can, go into service. And so that's always it just always seemed rather anomalous that they had this thing where they weren't drafting people right in the service, and they desperately need the manpower. Russia, we talked about this on the air. Russia's been running out of manpower for quite some time. That's why they got the North Koreans in there. They took folks from their strategic forces, their version of Space Force, if you will, and put them on the front lines as infantry, and they use them in meat waves. These just absolute human slaughter, kamikaze, brain dead attacks the Russians tend to do. And so they're very wasteful manpower. They don't have enough manpower. The myth of Russia's endless manpower pool is kind of falling apart. But Ukraine's got a big problem, which is they needed to do this. So the Biden administration is pushing them. By the way, one of the reasons they're pushing them is because they know that if they don't solve this, when the Trump administration comes in, it's going to be a much bigger issue under the Trump administration, because the Trump administration, let's just say, is a little less lenient towards Ukraine. I'll kind of leave it like that.
So, and maybe you've already answered this, but why haven't they done this already? If this is something that, and that was going to be my next question, is this normal in other countries to have an age of 25? It sounds like it's not. So why are we over 2 years into this war and they haven't done it yet? Has that been a head scratcher this entire time?
Well, for me, it's been a bit of a head scratcher, although I am not a politician in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And within Ukraine, this has been a political hot potato. And there has not, from what I can tell, there has not been this strong consensus in Ukraine to drop it down. It was when they dropped it from 27 to 25, this was after a lot of political debate that they got it down to 25. And now we're pushing for 18. I don't know if they're going to drop it down to 18, but I can certainly see them dropping it down, a few more years, possibly to 21, maybe 19, something like that. But for some reason, it's just what they're afraid of is that they mobilize, and it's primarily men, mobilize all the men of Ukraine. They go on the front line, and then and you have to go through Ukrainian history. You have to look at what happened in World War II. You have to look literally back to World War I. And the concept that was not unique to Ukraine, but certainly you saw it in Great Britain, the famous lost generation. They're afraid that if they mobilize, at 18, that they could lose a generation fighting the Russians, which, frankly, historically speaking, there's a lot to point to there that they would have that valid concern. But the other part is if you don't get that manpower on the front lines, it may become an academic point if you can't hold the Russians at bay.
So, in other news, this was another big one, and I want to hit this while we're still talking about Ukraine. President-elect Trump has tapped Keith Kellogg. He's a retired lieutenant general who presented him with a plan to end the war in Ukraine. He tapped him to serve as a special envoy for the conflict. Trump writing this on Truth Social on Wednesday. I'll read a little bit of it. Trump says, "I'm pleased to nominate General Keith Kellogg to serve as assistant to the president and special envoy for Ukraine and Russia. Keith has led a distinguished military and business career, including serving in highly sensitive national security roles in his first administration. He was with me right from the beginning. Together, we will secure peace through strength." What do we need to know about Kellogg, and what does a special envoy do?
Well, it's an interesting thing that it's a position that we haven't had before. This is a special envoy to Ukraine and Russia. That's another way of saying the special envoy to basically try and find a way to end the war is what it is. He's a retired lieutenant general, very distinguished career. Going back, he was a special forces in Cambodia during the Vietnam War. He commanded a brigade that went into Panama during Just Cause. He's airborne special forces. He's basically division commander. He's done a lot of things. Very very impressive career. And then of course he's a commentator on Fox, but he's also served in the first Trump administration, served in a variety of roles in National Security Council. He eventually worked for then Vice President Mike Pence as his national security advisor for the vice president's office. And he is completely engaged. He's basically looking at this. He's thinking about this. Obviously he put together this plan. Now, the plan that they're kind of pushing forward is something akin to freezing the lines, if you will, in order to get some sort of ceasefire in place. One thing, and it's kind of in the details, he recognizes that Ukraine is never going to give up its right to regain its sovereign territory. And from what I can tell, he's not pushing for Ukraine to ever relinquish that claim on the sovereign territory of Ukraine. What he's looking for is something practical to stop the slaughter on the front lines in that regard. And it'll be kind of interesting. He's kind of, I would say, sort of pro-Ukraine in a way, but he's also a realist from the Cold War. And he's 80 years old. He's a Cold Warrior. He's served much of his time in service was during the Cold War. Very familiar with the dynamics of the Soviet Union and former Soviet Union, and so very much tuned in on that as far as that goes. And a little side note: he went to high school in Long Beach, California. Went to the same high school that my two sons went to, so I thought that was kind of interesting as well.
Two LA guys. And I think we have a statement here. Let's pull this up if we can, Caleb, because Kellogg did speak on X. He says, "I'm honored by Trump's appointment to serve as assistant to the president and special envoy for Ukraine and Russia. It was the privilege of my life working for President Trump, and I look forward to working tirelessly to secure peace through strength while upholding America's interests. I am ready with the commitment and dedication that it deserves."